The cigar fell in slow motion. Steve McQueen, Hollywood's coolest man and the star of The Magnificent Seven, watched the Cuban drop from his lips and hit the concrete floor of Soundstage 9 at Paramount Studios. For 5 full seconds, an eternity in movie time, the king of cool was anything but cool. He was stunned, speechless, and staring at Sammy Davis Jr., as if seeing him for the first time. What had just happened defied everything McQueen thought he knew about speed, about talent, and about who belonged in the gunfighter club. In 0.19 seconds, Sammy Davis Jr. had shattered more than just a quick-draw record. He had shattered Steve McQueen's entire worldview about what made a man dangerous. This is the untold story of the day Hollywood's coolest tough guy learned that real speed doesn't come from attitude. It comes from artistry. And sometimes, the most devastating lesson is delivered by the person you least expect. It was March 15, 1960, and Paramount Studios was buzzing with the success of The Magnificent Seven. Steve McQueen, at 30 years old, was riding the wave of his breakthrough performance as the gunfighter Vin Tanner. The film had established him as Hollywood's new definition of cool, laconic, dangerous, and lightning fast, with a 6-gun. McQueen had worked hard to earn that reputation. He had trained with professional gunfighters, practiced his draw for hours every day, and developed the kind of quick-draw skills that made him genuinely fast by Hollywood standards. His 0.8-second draw was respectable among actors, and his natural swagger made it look even faster on screen. More importantly, McQueen had cultivated an image of effortless masculinity that extended far beyond his movies. In his blue jeans, gray t-shirt, and signature gun belt, he moved through the studio lot like a man who owned it. Other actors deferred to his coolness. Directors respected his authenticity, and everyone understood that Steve McQueen was the real deal, a genuine tough guy who happened to act, not an actor pretending to be tough. Which is why he was so irritated by what he was witnessing on Soundstage 9. Sammy Davis Jr., dressed in a black silk shirt and tailored dark pants, was entertaining a small crowd of crew members with his gun-handling tricks. At 35, Sammy was one of the biggest stars in entertainment, but his presence on a Western movie set seemed incongruous to McQueen. This was cowboy territory, and Sammy Davis Jr. was song and dance territory. But what really annoyed McQueen was the attention Sammy was getting. The crew members were gasping and applauding as Sammy spun his Colt .45 around his finger, flipped it through the air, and caught it with flourishes that looked more like choreography than gunfighting. McQueen took a long drag from his Cuban cigar and decided it was time to restore some perspective to the situation. "Real impressive, Sammy," McQueen said, his voice carrying that trademark laconic drawl that had made him famous. "But that's not gunfighting. That's twirling. There's a difference between putting on a show and putting lead on target." The crowd of crew members fell silent. Everyone on the Paramount lot knew about the mutual respect between major stars, but they also knew that Steve McQueen didn't give respect easily. And right now, his tone suggested something more pointed than casual criticism. Sammy looked up from his gun-spinning demonstration, his expression unreadable. He had dealt with dismissive attitudes his entire career, but coming from McQueen, Hollywood's new king of Western authenticity, the criticism stung more than usual. "Is that right, Steve?" Sammy replied, his voice calm but carrying an edge that those who knew him recognized as dangerous. "What makes gunfighting different from twirling?" McQueen stepped closer, the cigar still dangling from his lips, his gun belt hanging low on his hips in the classic gunfighter position. "Speed that matters. Quick draw isn't about looking pretty, it's about being faster than the other guy, period." The challenge was unmistakable. McQueen was drawing a line between serious gunfighters and entertainers who played with guns. Between men who could actually handle themselves in a confrontation and performers who just looked good doing tricks. Sammy set his Colt down on a nearby equipment crate and studied McQueen with the intense focus he usually reserved for learning new dance steps or musical arrangements. You're saying I can't actually draw fast, just twirl pretty? I'm saying there's a difference between playing cowboy and being a cowboy, McQueen replied. And in my experience, singers and dancers usually stick to singing and dancing. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Around them, the crew members exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't friendly banter anymore. This was a challenge to Sammy's credibility in territory that McQueen considered his own. But what McQueen didn't know was that he had just challenged the wrong person. Sammy Davis Jr.'s interest in firearms had begun in childhood and had been refined over 2 decades of serious practice. While McQueen had trained for months to look convincing in the Magnificent Seven, Sammy had been perfecting his quick-draw technique for years, approaching it with the same obsessive dedication he brought to every other skill he mastered. More importantly, Sammy had developed his speed not for show, but for respect. As a black entertainer navigating white Hollywood, he understood that commanding attention in unexpected areas could shift how people saw him. If he could outdraw the Cowboys, maybe they'd have to see him as more than just an entertainer. "Tell you what, Steve," Sammy said, picking up his Colt and checking the cylinder to ensure it was loaded with blanks. "Why don't we settle this question the old-fashioned way?" McQueen's eyes narrowed. "You want to draw against me?" "I want to see what real gunfighting looks like," Sammy replied. "Since you're the expert." The crew members began to gather in a wider circle. Word was spreading through the soundstage that Steve McQueen and Sammy Davis Jr. were about to face off in a quick-draw contest. It was the kind of Hollywood moment that would be talked about for decades. McQueen removed his cigar and flicked it into a nearby ashtray. His confidence was unshaken. He had trained with professional gunfighters and had developed genuine speed. Sammy, for all his other talents, was still just an entertainer playing with guns. "Your call, Sammy, but don't say I didn't warn you." The 2 men took positions 10 feet apart, facing each other across the empty floor of the soundstage. McQueen stood in the classic gunfighter stance, feet slightly apart, weight balanced, right hand hanging loose near his holster. He looked every inch the Western hero he played on screen. Sammy's stance was different, more fluid, less rigid, as if he were preparing for a dance rather than a gunfight. His hand hung at his side, but there was a coiled energy in his posture that suggested explosive potential. One of the crew members volunteered to call the draw. "On 3, he announced. 1, 2, 3. What happened next became legend on the Paramount lot. McQueen's draw was respectable. His hand moved smoothly to his gun, cleared the holster, and brought the weapon to firing position in just under a second. For a Hollywood actor, it was impressive speed that would look great on camera. But Sammy Davis Jr. defied physics. His draw didn't look like a draw at all, it looked like magic. One moment the gun was in his holster, the next moment it was in his hand, aimed and ready to fire. There was no visible motion, no dramatic flourish, just the instantaneous appearance of the weapon in firing position. The sound of Sammy's blank cartridge firing echoed through the soundstage a full half-second before McQueen's gun had even cleared his holster. The silence that followed was complete and profound. The crew members stood frozen, trying to process what they had witnessed. McQueen stood with his gun half-drawn, staring at Sammy in disbelief. "What the hell was that?" McQueen whispered. One of the crew members had been timing the draw with a stopwatch. His voice was shaky as he announced the results. "Mr. Davis, 0.19 seconds. The number meant nothing to most of the people present, but McQueen understood immediately. Professional gunfighters considered anything under 0.5 seconds to be extremely fast. SUB 0.3 seconds was the realm of true experts. 0.19 seconds was inhuman. "That's impossible," McQueen said, holstering his own weapon. "Nobody draws that fast." Sammy smiled. Not the grin of a showman who had just pulled off a trick, but the quiet satisfaction of a master craftsman who had just demonstrated his art. "Want to try again, Steve? I'd hate for you to think it was a fluke." The second draw was even faster, 0.18 seconds. The third was 0.17 seconds. Each time, McQueen's respectable speed looked sluggish by comparison. By the fourth demonstration, Steve McQueen's cigar had fallen from his lips and he was staring at Sammy with a mixture of awe and something approaching fear. "How?" was all he could manage. Sammy's explanation revealed the depth of his preparation and the unique perspective he brought to gunfighting. "You learn to draw for movies, Steve. I learned to draw for survival. When you're black in Hollywood, when you're trying to prove you belong in rooms where people question your right to be there, every skill becomes a weapon. Every talent becomes a shield." He demonstrated his modified holster, showing how he had adjusted every element to complement his natural hand speed and body mechanics. "You approach this like an actor learning a role. I approach it like a performer whose life depends on being unforgettable." McQueen listened in silence, beginning to understand that what he had witnessed wasn't just superior technique, it was a completely different philosophy of speed and preparation. "The twirling, the tricks, all that showmanship," Sammy continued, "that's not separate from the speed. It's part of developing the hand-eye coordination, the muscle memory, the relationship with the weapon. You see style and substance as different things. I see them as the same thing." The lesson was profound and humbling. McQueen had built his reputation on authentic toughness, but he was learning that authenticity came in forms he hadn't recognized. Sammy's artistry wasn't the opposite of genuine skill. It was a different path to the same destination. "You know what the real difference is between us?" McQueen asked finally. "What's that?" "You don't draw fast to look cool. You draw fast because you are cool. The speed is just proof." It was perhaps the greatest compliment Steve McQueen had ever given another performer. Coming from Hollywood's king of cool, it was an acknowledgement that Sammy's mastery transcended entertainment categories and entered the realm of genuine artistry. The encounter between Steve McQueen and Sammy Davis Jr. was never reported in trade papers or entertainment magazines. Both men preferred to keep their private moments of mutual respect away from public scrutiny. But the story spread through Hollywood's insider network, becoming one of those legendary tales that define the real relationships between major stars. McQueen returned to his Western roles with a new understanding of what authentic skill looked like. He continued to train and improve his own quick-draw abilities, but he never again dismissed someone else's approach based on appearances or preconceptions. Sammy, for his part, gained something even more valuable than respect from Hollywood's toughest tough guy. He had proven to himself that his talents could command recognition in any arena, from any peer, regardless of the assumptions people brought to the encounter. Years later, when McQueen was asked about the fastest draw he had ever seen, he would always give the same answer: Sammy Davis Jr., 0.17 seconds, Paramount Studios, 1960. And I was stupid enough to challenge him to prove it. The lesson of that day went beyond quick-draw records or entertainment industry hierarchy. It was a reminder that mastery comes in many forms, that authentic skill transcends categories, and that the most dangerous assumption is that you know what someone else is capable of based on how they look or what you think they represent. Steve McQueen had walked onto that sound stage as the undisputed king of Hollywood cool, confident in his own authenticity and superiority. He walked away with a deeper understanding of what real mastery looked like, and a healthy respect for the man who had taught him that artistry and authenticity were not opposites, but different expressions of the same pursuit of excellence. The cigar that fell from his lips had been more than just tobacco and paper. It had been the physical manifestation of his assumptions, his preconceptions, and his certainty about who belonged in which category of talent. And in 0.19 seconds, Sammy Davis Jr. had taught him that the most impressive thing about true speed isn't how fast it is, it's how quickly it can change your mind about everything you thought you knew.